Hello and welcome to this week's video, this time with Mel Murphy, a divorce expert. Mel, you and I met through networking group, and I remember very well that we were in a meeting where some of us shared their stories, and you had such a moving story that you told us that explains to us how you got into doing the things that you do. I thought that it would make sense to bring you in to my channel because I often come across, usually, if people are struggling with their relationship with food, there's normally something else behind it. And sometimes it's something to do with the relationship that they're in. And
Yeah.
so I thought it would be great to hear directly from someone who actively and specifically works in this area to hear their thoughts about it. So, can you just first perhaps tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to do the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this opportunity, by the way, Liliana. So my name is Mel Murphy. I'm Ireland's first divorce coach. I have expertise as a divorce coach, so I've trained specifically in that area. And I also train other coaches, anyone who's interested in it, actually, to be a divorce coach as well. So I work with the Divorce Coaching Academy to train divorce coaches. We do that twice a year. So I've got training globally, both in the States and over here in Europe. And I'm also an executive coach. I've been an executive coach for over 12 years now, an executive and life coach. And I work in companies with executives and my focus now actually is also working on executives who are divorcing or professionals who are divorcing. And also working with HR divisions and diversity and inclusion to look at how can they provide a good support for people who are going through separation and divorce, because during that time, it's actually the most stressful thing for anyone who's going through. It's the most stressful thing, even more than the loss of a loved one or a spouse, because it's the loss of your loved one or spouse the way you thought they were supposed to be. It's the loss of the dream of the relationship. And you're moving house very often, and your finances are up in the air, and you're managing the children, and everything is basically changing. And because of that, often people will their productivity at work will go down by up to 50%, and it could go on for 2 to 3 years, right, depending on how long the divorce goes for. And therefore, in order to avoid any mental health issues during this time, it's really important for human resources to be aware through diversity and inclusion of parents going through this, support them, and then support them as a single parent or lone parent afterwards. And what we find is that once it's all done and dusted and they're out the other side, they become one of the best employees, because there's a lot of pressure on them then to, have a roof over their head and have the money to put food on the table for their children and pay the bills. So they will be very good employees and put their career first, and will often see their career trajectories taking off, especially for women, actually. So it's just sort of treating their employees a bit like their customers, and taking care of them. So I work on those different areas with HR, diversity, inclusion, with professionals and executives going through divorce, and also training people to become divorce coaches. A lot of people we train would be people who've gone through it themselves and come out the other side. We don't like to train people while they're going through their divorce, because we think that they could be a bit biased, based on their own views. So we wait until afterwards, once they've recovered. People who deal with maybe lawyers, we've got a lot of family lawyers who've done our course, counselors, child experts, child psychologists, and anyone who's just a life coach as well, or is coached in some other way, will often like to add this as an extra to what they already know. Mediators as well. So yeah, a lot of different areas that I'm focused on. I was Ireland's first divorce coach, and I'm proud to say with 15 new people trained in across the UK and Ireland now, 4 of them are in Ireland. So there's a huge demand because of the 30% increase in divorce rates over the pandemic period. And I think that's going to rise even more now that the courts are more open and active. So with all of that going on, and the fact that it's the most stressful thing in anyone's life, you know, it's surprising that we haven't had this support here before, and it's really necessary now.
Yeah, so it is surprising, isn't it? Not just that a reality that is unfortunately so common, and it has been for so long, that there wasn't any specific support for it. And a lot of the things you were saying there are also, I'm sure, surprising to people, such as the fact that this type of grief can impact somebody even more than the grief of a loved one, or the fact that their productivity goes down so much. And I just wonder how many people have gone on working as if, well, tried to make it seem as if nothing was happening, I suppose, to the outside. Or even the fact that afterwards they're so committed to doing their best. So I heard a lot of things there that I wasn't aware of, and I imagine a lot of people in the audience hadn't really have any idea. And it just strikes me how such a common thing to happen, because sometimes relationships don't work, is actually so under. There isn't enough support for it. There isn't enough qualified people in that area.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of support needed. Just to avoid, I know that people can go to counselors, but what we like to do is counseling kind of helps with the past, with what's happened in your past. And that can be very useful, especially when, the overwhelm is just too much and you just need to take a break from everything and get some good help. What coaches do is we like to kind of help you during the process and focus on the future. So you've decided, we work with people both before, like when they're contemplating divorce, so we do work with them on how to keep the relationship going. Then we work with them when they're planning. They've decided, let's say, if they've gone to relationship counseling that's really not working, they've really decided it's just not going to work out. Planning for it, so making sure they set things up for success before they make the move. So there's a lot of good positive things to put in place before you kind of announce to your spouse, children, everyone that you're going through divorce. And that's especially important for people separating from narcissistic and coercive control situations, because once they announce it, there's security issues for them, and the person can get very mean and block them in a lot of different ways. So that's especially important to have that done. Then we help them during the process of divorce. So help them to structure, while we're not, we don't have the legal capacity, we can help them structure the steps and how to approach a lawyer. We have a whole team around us of lawyers that we work with, collaborative lawyers, financial planners, child experts, everything that they'll need, depending, because everyone's separation and divorce is going to be different. And we work with people in separation, not just divorce. So we'll look at their situation and bring in whatever person we think is going to help them, different barristers and experts. And we get good prices with them as well. We have some good price plans. And we help structure what they're going to need to do. Even before they see a lawyer, what do they have to put in place and have before they go in to see the lawyer, so they can make the most of that time. We help prepare them for court. So if they have to go stand up in court, it could be really scary and very unnerving. So we help them with that as well. And when they're wondering what to say to the children or how to manage the children's emotions, we help them with that, how to deal with family and what the family's going to say, or their friends, how to say it to their spouse, and also how to deal with a very difficult ex who may be sending very difficult messages, etc. And then we also help them with a financial piece. So, planning the finances is a really important one. Housing, all of that piece, and just kind of getting their finances in order. We can put them in contact with forensic experts and wealth experts if they think that their ex is hiding money, for example, and they can have good discussions with that. And then we help them kind of focus on their future, where they want to go, and keep that in mind so that they can understand when it comes to the divorce, what is it that they really want from it. You know, a lot of people, they don't even know how to put together a statement of needs, which is like their budget, basically. You know, so we'll help them with that. They don't know what they really want in their future. So we help them make sure they don't make the 5 biggest mistakes in divorce. And kind of, we see them going that direction, we'll explain to them, you know, that what the different possibilities that those big mistakes would be. And we just support them emotionally. Sometimes they just want to chat, you know, because they don't have anyone who really understands what they're going through, whereas most of us will have gone through it before and come out the other side and have our new lives there ready and going. And we can show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel, because when you're in that place, it's a very dark place to be. So we help support them through that emotions, allow them to download, and then look at, in every single conversation we have with them, okay, what's the thing you want to work on today? And what's the structure we need to put in place for you? So yeah, we have a lot of exercises and structures and, you know, systems that have worked well for people. And then we have the empathetic ear as well.
Okay, well, yeah, it does sound amazing, and it sounds like a very comprehensive. It's like the place to go for anything that you need. With regards to a potential divorce or separation. I wanted just to take a little step back in that process, because we're talking a lot about, okay, I've decided, or I'm thinking about it, and what could I do, and how can you help me? But if we were to take a little step back, and perhaps also focusing a little bit on the overlap between what I come across and what perhaps you come across as well. I mean, I certainly often come across people that I would say are contemplating, sometimes contemplating the contemplation of going through a divorce or a separation. And they find themselves in a place where they recognize they're not happy in the relationship that they're in. And in my case specifically, the work that I've been doing so far, they would be, one of the impacts would be how they're eating. And so their relationship with food, and their relationship with themselves and their self-esteem. So is this something that you come across as well?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's how people, you know, deal with stress, and that stress can begin before the relationship ends. And it's normal, by the way, for most of, you know, marriages or relationships will go through ups and downs through life, and it might be even a year or two of down, then it goes back up again. So people might contemplate leaving a marriage when, you know, there are ways to resolve it. But obviously during that stress, there could be some people will put on weight, other people will lose a lot of weight, depending on how they deal with the stress. So people just can't eat because their stomach is so much in knots that they just can't eat. That's not necessarily healthy either, right? They look and start to look gaunt. They don't get the vitamins they need, and they can get sick easier. Other people, the trigger is to eat because that's their response, right? It's like the comfort food piece. And also they might not get the exercise in, because if they're going through the separation or divorce, you know, they might have to suddenly take more care of the kids. There isn't someone else there to look after them. So their usual routine is all up in the air. And, you know, it's normal when people go through divorce, there's this stage of disbelief that's happening, then anger, depression, and then kind of bargaining to try and get the person back, and more depression, and then finally accepting it. But during that turmoil and all the things that are going on, being able to fit in exercise and quality food is sort of last on their mind, you know. So that can lead to choices, different food choices. But also before they leave the relationship, you know, some people will be, especially if they're in a coercive control relationship, they may be told they're fat, told they're, you know, this, that, or the other, and be put under a lot of direction to lose weight by their ex. Or during their relationship, you know, there will be a lot of focus on how they look and making sure they look perfect for that person. And sometimes when they're leaving, they go against that. They put on weight on purpose because they finally aren't being controlled and told what to eat. And it's almost kind of going against, you know, what the ex used to say to them. So there's different responses and different triggers in people's lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there any other ways that you notice a bad relationship may impact someone's life other than eating?
Well, there's a lot of different ways the relationship can, it depends if it's a course of control relationship. There's a lot of really good tips on women's aid or even men's aid, because it can be women controlling men as well. That does happen. It's interesting, like 1 in 4 women will be in some kind of abusive or coercive control relationship, and 1 in 6 men, which is actually a lot higher than we expect. I think there was 1.6 million women in those sort of relationships in the UK last year, and I think it was 750,000 men. So it's rampant, actually, unfortunately, but most people don't really talk about it. And it'll take a woman 7 or 8 times leaving the relationship and going back to it before they will finally leave for good, unfortunately, because it's very hard, especially under coercive control, for them to understand what's really happening, which is why I suggest they go look at the websites from Women's Aid or Men's Aid. It's kind of insidious, because it's the person kind of eating away at their self-confidence, right? And in so doing, they could put on weight because they're using that as their comfort food, which kind of leads to more comments from their partner at the time. Or their partner can be, as I said, controlling their weight and making sure they stay a certain weight because they want them to look good for them. It's all about the partner's ego. It's all about walking on eggshells, like if you feel that you're having to be very careful what you say or do so that they don't lose their temper. If the things they used to love about you, they're suddenly, telling you how bad their favorite food is now and you can't cook it properly. It's them making snide comments about you in front of the children, trying to turn the children a little bit against you. It's them not wanting you to see friends or family. We're trying to put your friends or family down and say bad things about them to turn you against them, because the whole thing that they're trying to do is cut you off from anyone else who could support you so they can control you fully. And there's a lot of control around the finances as well, right? It could be that too. It happens to anyone, that happens to even women who are very successful at work, who seem very successful outside the home. But once they're home, they're put back into this box and, made to feel that they're just not good enough. They're just not making, and no matter what they do, they're not making their partner happy, and it's the same with men too. The women can have temper tantrums and throw things at them and hit them and, treat them very badly too. So it can happen both ways. And then often it starts to, after a few years, as it gets worse and worse. And the thing is that the partner will then turn around and be really, really nice to the person again. It's that cycle, right? And then everything will be lovely and glorious, and you'll think that they're amazing and they're treating you really well with flowers and dinners and, going away and romantic getaways. And then just when you think everything's really good, it'll start to decline again and go back into that cycle. And that's why it's so difficult for people to leave, because they remember this partner the way that they were, because usually these people will have been the most loving, amazing people initially. And they just cling to that idea of who they married or who they're with. And when they're in this bad place, they just can't really believe that they really like that. And so to go back to being in the good place, they kind of cling to that again. And that's why it's very hard for people to leave. And it's very hard for them to pinpoint exactly what it was that their partner was doing. But bit by bit, it can lead to, it destroys their confidence in themselves. It puts them more in the control of their partner, and can start to affect their mental health. And they can start to turn to drink or to drugs or to things that are going to more comfort food, things that are going to just make them feel better about themselves.
Yeah. I 2 things came to mind as you were speaking. One of them is the situation that you're describing is more serious and more extreme, with a certain kind of personality on the partner side. But unfortunately, some of the things you've said are actually quite common, even though you might, for example, the fact that you need to be very careful with what you say, otherwise you're going to trigger your partner, or the fact that when you complain about something, when you finally have the courage, because oftentimes people don't have the courage to speak up, but when you finally reflect that something may not go well, the partner will just tell you it's all in your imagination, and there you go again. So I just wanted to say this because even I guess for those out there who are listening, even if you're not with somebody that you would perhaps characterize as being an actual narcissist or something like that, but if you find yourself in a situation where you just can't be yourself, then there's something in there that's not working very well anymore. And another thing that occurred to me as well was that there is the fact that, yes, this person was once amazing and now they're being very cruel, but then they're amazing again. And this creates a cognitive dissonance in your head, which means you believe two things that are opposite to each other. One part of you knows something's wrong, it feels something's wrong, and I'm hurting and I'm not happy. And the other part thinks, well, but this person is amazing. And oftentimes the solution to solving this is, well, it must be my fault. There must be something wrong with me. If I cannot see how good this person is, maybe I should be more forgiving and more kind and more tolerant, or I should change. I need to improve.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a self-blame because they're making you feel that way. They're saying, oh, it's all your fault, no matter what. It's never going to be their fault. And it's really, what's really important is if you do start to feel ready to leave that situation, you have to be super careful because it's from the time that you say you're leaving for up to 3 months afterwards, but especially the first month, that things can be a little bit dangerous because even if they haven't hit you yet, they may have punched the wall next to you, or they may have acted aggressively some other way. They may have tried to choke you. Once the person feels that you're no longer going to be in their control, that you're leaving them, or they sense, or they see, they find out you're planning to leave them, they can get quite violent and aggressive, and become someone very different to who you thought they were. And that's why, we say to go to Women's Aid or Men's Aid and get that support first to make sure you're going to leave safely. Because you just don't know how they're going to react when you say it to them. And that's why we try to help people with the planning stage first, so that when they do leave, things are ready in terms of finances, what was in the bank account, have they kind of looked at getting their career back up and running, or starting to train for that if they've been out of work for a long time and dependent on the other person for the money. Is there what's their credit score like, and is their credit score attached to their exes or their current partner, and will that impact them, and in terms of mortgages and getting loans, once you're separated or divorced, it's very hard. The banks don't like you whatsoever. They see you as someone who's very likely, and unfortunately it is very much often the case, someone who may not be able to pay back debts or loans. So it's better to try and get a lot of the financial stuff sorted before the separation or divorce starts, because if you need to get loans or mortgages, it's easier that way.
Okay.
The two biggest pieces in divorce are the children and the finances, right? And often you can, depending on the kind of partner you had, you can mediate, and the courts will, and your lawyers will usually ask you to go try mediation first. That's hard to do if you're in a coercive control relationship, because they usually won't be willing to share. They might often want to hurt the person as much as possible in any way they can. And it can be very difficult, but it depends on the relationship. They're not all like that, obviously. So if you can mediate most of your agreement, if not all of it, mostly people mediate up to 80%. And then maybe it's usually around the family, home, finances, and children that they can't. Another big area that is to be looked at is the pension, right? So if someone has stayed home and not worked and looked after the family home and doesn't have as much of a pension, pensions can be shared. Half, or depending on other circumstances. So that's always something that a lawyer will bring up and take into consideration as well.
Outside this situation that you were describing, that is a little bit more extreme, where the partner could even become aggressive and do a lot of very extreme things. What other obstacles do you think people face when they're contemplating a separation?
The biggest one is usually the family home, especially right now. It's like, where will they both live? A lot of people who are going through separation and divorce will actually still live in the same home together. It's really awkward, if not horrible situation. Also for any children involved too, because if children can see through everything and they can sense everything. So, if there's a way to stay respectful, have as much space, have your own space. Usually they'll have their own rooms anyway, and just be as cordial as possible. I suggest to people to just make it a business relationship, and a lot of marriages end up that way anyway. They, if the main thing I find in relationships to keep them together is to allow people to have their own space and to do the things they need to in their lives, and a lot of women, when they get into their 40s and get into the kind of premenopause, menopause time, their emotions, their emotions change. Like what would you call this? They just change internally in terms of less estrogen, etc.
Yeah.
The hormones, that's the word I was looking for. The hormones change, and they move from the kind of hormone that helps you care for the family unit and focus on raising the children in the family unit, to focusing on what they want out of their lives. So it's like a midlife crisis in a way for women around that time. In the same way as men have their midlife crisis a little bit earlier, women do too. They start to think, what do I want from this life? Am I really happy in this life? What else do I need? Which is why a divorce coach is really good at this stage as well, to help them through that piece, because that's a big piece we focus on. What is it they want from their lives? And if they can still give each other space in that relationship to do that, they don't need to necessarily separate, as long as they give each other space to do their own little thing and then still work as a couple, as a unit. If they still have the same values about their family and their children and basic values, they can still live harmoniously quite well together. They don't even need to do a separation or divorce, but if they are just choosing to go separate ways because whatever personal reasons they feel it's better to do that, then to try and keep that business relationship together as much as possible. And they can do a mediated agreement, which is like almost like a little contract between themselves about how they're going to co-parent the children, how they're going to do around the finances, around the children's education, and all of that. And then they can get that put into a separation agreement, which is a legal document by the court. And a lot of that they can do themselves, really.
Okay, yeah, because seeing a coach who has some expertise in divorce doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have to get divorced. Exactly. It just means that idea is on the horizon, and you need someone to talk to about that.
Yeah, and a lot of our divorce coaches are also mediators too, so they have both of it in place. So like we deal with the pre-divorce and then planning for divorce as well. So we can help kind of broker those sort of agreements. And I'm finding that there are a lot of people trying to do more amicable divorces. They just don't want to pay the huge fees of lawyers, because even an amicable divorce can be about €10,000. And then one that's not can be much higher than that. So there are the DIY divorces too. So once you've been separated for 2 years, you can decide to go fully and do the DIY divorce. I do always suggest, though, that they should kind of run it by their own lawyers as well, just to make sure. And then there's also what's called a collaborative lawyer, which is sort of the in-between. So they're usually mediators as well, but also family lawyers. And each party will get their own collaborative lawyer, and they'll just sit down and they'll discuss and agree and mediate between themselves, but also have the legal piece there too, and come to a more amicable agreement. And that's usually a little bit, a lot cheaper than a high conflict divorce. So it's really, I say to people, it's all about how mature you can be, and how mature the adults can be will impact the children and the cost of their divorce.
Yeah.
So,
And would you help two people get back together again? I mean, stay together and be happy, mend their
um,
relationship.
yeah, normally we can do what's called pre-mediation. So we work with clients before they even go into mediation to, be prepared for that and have a think about what's really important to them. So we can do that as well. We get trained in that as well. We do expert training with our divorce coaches on all those different areas, the pre-mediation, the coercive control and abuse, and we kind of deep dive into all those different areas. And we also, a lot of it is like, why are they unhappy? Sometimes people will be blaming their partner for their unhappiness and think it's just the relationship and that's the reason. But when you deep dive, and that's what you do as a coach, you kind of ask the why questions and dive under the surface. And then the client starts to say, actually, it's not them that's making me unhappy, it's this other thing or this stuff in my life, or maybe it's just my weight, or I'm unhappy with myself and I'm not feeling confident and I'm blaming all this stuff on my partner, when in fact if I could fix other things in my life, the relationship is actually okay. So that's why the pre-divorce is really important as well. Yeah.
Okay, so somebody who takes the brave step of actually getting that divorce, what kind, past the initial challenges, of course, and turbulence that might happen, what have you seen as the biggest benefits that they got out of that?
Yeah, so for people who have tried to mend their relationship and did everything they can and realize it's just not working for whatever reason, or that they'll be happier afterwards, and even during the divorce, they might not even realize that. And it's very, very, very tumultuous during that time, or can be, because there's so much paperwork to do, so much to organize, so much potential change going on. So depending on how high conflict it was or not, sometimes when people come out, they've been kind of holding themselves together, just to get through. And it's a bit like when you're working really, really, really hard and then you take a vacation and then you get sick when you take your vacation because all the stress comes off you. It's a bit like that after the divorce too, because depending on how stressed you were, it can all kind of come down on you. And actually you get kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. So you can actually fall, even though you're kind of so relieved it's finally over and you sort of celebrate, there's a big part of you that's also has to grieve the loss of the relationship. And even if though it might have been a long divorce process of 2 to 3 years, once you walk out of that courtroom and the divorce is through, there's a kind of a disbelief. And then there's a grief for the fact that relationship that you'd hoped and the dreams you'd hoped are definitely gone. And that there can be a lot of, we work with our clients around a lot of self-work as well and focus on themselves. So a lot of forgiveness towards the ex, forgiveness towards family or friends that maybe weren't by them as much as they wanted during that time. But there's a lot of self-forgiveness work that you have to do too, around why did you allow yourself to be treated that way, or different things. It's just like detaching from that relationship and what we call cutting the cord exercises as well, so that they can leave with a lighter feeling, right? You don't want to carry the anger, you don't want to carry the revenge with you. You want to try and get rid of it, because the only person that you're hurting is really yourself. You're not really hurting them. And you're probably hurting the children and anyone around you with all this anger and revenge and hurt. So it's all about the healing process. And sometimes that work can start during the divorce process, but a lot of it can be done afterwards. And it's about then focusing on where do they want to be in 3 to 5 years' time. And it's more of a life coaching piece there, and how the steps to get there. And it's recovering financially. It's kind of settling the children into the new routine if they have any, and just getting the life going again. So it's all about what routine do they want, what's going to work for them, and how do they get to where they want to be over the next 3 to 5 years. Because it can take about 3 years at least to recover financially from it. And then within 6 months or so, the children will usually get into the routine of what's happening if you stick by the parenting agreement. So we put together a parenting agreement as well. We can help broker that as to when the children will see which parent, who's picking up for school, which activities they go to. And I have a 25-point plan of all the things you have to think about, very detailed, for that parenting agreement to actually work and to avoid changes in it. So, we will take them through that during the divorce process when they're putting that together with the courts. But also afterwards, if there's still a little bit more detail that has to be added into it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
usually people, if they have decided to divorce and it's what they really want, they are much happier afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for sure that, well, I was fortunate enough that my personal story was very brief, so it wasn't everything was sorted in 3 months. It was a different country as well, and things are easier, and we didn't have children, we didn't have a lot of assets or anything. So psychologically it was tough.
Yeah.
And especially I remember how this person and that's why I was saying sometimes we may not be dealing with someone on the extreme case of narcissism or anything, but a lot of those things will happen anyway in a lot of separations, where once he noticed that it was for real and I wasn't going back, because he tried to mend things after. But once he noticed that, he didn't really, it seemed like now he wasn't as, it almost seemed like revenge, and this is the person who knows you best. This is the person who got to know your weaknesses. They know how to hurt you.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't very extreme, but it all makes so much difference to you that this person that was your companion has now turned against you, and then you turn against him, and then you bump heads together. So this is not, I'm not trying to do a blame game here, but it is a very stressful and there's a lot of resentment from either side. But once I finally was over that, I became so much more independent, and I never forgot that lesson. So every relationship that I've had since, I never submitted myself again to the same sorts of things. And if I start having this conviction that things are not going to work out, I just cannot stay in that relationship anymore, because I've been through it once. I've been through that separation, and I've become so much stronger. And I guess that's the message that I wanted to leave, is that there's a tunnel to go through, but there's a light at the end, and maybe there's an amazing garden and there's a lot of parties or something like that. And it can be the best thing that ever happened to you once it's resolved.
Exactly. And unfortunately, the X isn't going to go away, especially if your children are under 18. Once they're over 18, you no longer have to talk to that X ever again. But until that time, there might be interactions and communications that have to happen. But there's ways we put in place that those don't have to be as hurtful or as protracted as they were before. And I work with a lot of clients who are dealing with aggressive exes who still communicate very aggressively towards them, and how to put up the boundaries around that, and how to show their independence and freedom, whereas that ex is trying to reel them back in and press their buttons, as you said, so they know how to press the buttons. And maybe working with the children and doing kind of parental alienation with the children, where they stop or saying things that are going to impact the children. So there can be, unfortunately, a little bit of ongoing stuff, but there is ways the person has escaped them really and has their own life, and it's about putting the boundaries up, knowing like what they can control and can't control, and understanding what legal support and other support systems they have there to protect them from whatever aggressive communications this ex is still doing, or whatever games they're still continuing to play. But the best thing is that it's kind of over there, and it's not part of their life on a daily basis anymore. They have their lives, they're free to live their lives their way without this person next to them every single time of the day.
Yeah. There's a big piece around learning to be assertive and setting those boundaries that needs to be learned, and sometimes that has been a challenge for this person, and how they didn't recognize the partner that they were with, and that's how they
Yeah.
stayed in that relationship.
They can still be very scared of the partner, and
Yeah.
there's a use to kind of carrying down and allowing them to talk to them like that. That is a new learning that is starting. They can get learned a little bit during the divorce process, but there's this, what we'll often see is this renewed sense of confidence and light coming out. That's why, you know, my divorce coach in Ireland banner, it's the sailing on the sea of emotion, but they're looking forward and looking like, you know, they've survived. So they come in out much more resilient, and you're no longer under that person's control. There's ways to get away from them. Yeah.
That's great. I've learned so much
That's great.
during this time we spent together. I just have a couple of final questions for you. If there was one thing that people could retain out of this conversation, what do you think that would be? What's the message you'd like to leave them with?
Well, I think a key message, as I said, is like how mature the parents are will have a huge impact both on the cost, but also on the children, right? And there's different ways to talk to the children depending on what age group they are. There's different ways they're going to react, and there's ways to know how to put that in place. And as you said yourself, even though it's a very difficult time, and to recognize it is the most stressful thing you'll ever have to do, that you will come out of it, even if it does take a bit longer than you'd hoped, that you will be free someday to be more in control of your own life. So this too shall pass, even if it doesn't feel like it at this moment in time. And also what's important is the children will be okay, you know, and, you know, they usually are more resilient than we think. So a lot of people stay in very bad relationships because of the children, but in fact, the children are usually much happier when they're away from a very negative environment. And especially if it's a very aggressive, negative environment that they're in, it's best to take them away from that, because otherwise they'll look for the same sort of thing in their next partners and continue the cycle. So if you can get them away from that, it's actually better for the children.
Exactly, because they're growing up in that environment and it normalizes those behaviors for them.
Yeah.
And so when they come across someone who is like that, they're not going to recognize that that's a bad thing. So actually, you're teaching your children as well to set boundaries when you're capable of setting those boundaries yourself also.
Yeah. And the finances might be a bit tough for a while, but there are things you can do. There's elements within your control. So I talk about the circle of control, what you can control and what you can't. And what you can't control is what can overwhelm people. So we focus on what they can control. So you can go back and, you know, go back to education. You can start a career again. There's lots of good career supports from the government as well. So there is a way to kind of climb out of a difficult place financially.
Okay. So how can people find you if they want to know more about your work? And feel free to tell us a bit more about the academy that you have as well for coaches and therapists.
Yeah. So I focus mostly on Ireland, but I do have another website for outside of Ireland too. So within Ireland, it's divorce coaching. It's divorcecoachingireland.com. And then my executive and HR and diversity and inclusion is melmurphyinternational.com. So you can go on there and you can find ways to contact me there, or just send me an email at melmurphy@divorcecoachingireland if you want to ask for more and book in some time with me. And I'm going to be starting a 6-week course at the end of March, just taking people through everything that I talked to you about in a lot more detail. So it depends on which stage of their relationship they're in, or separation or divorce. And we can put together a 6-week plan specific for them. So I'm going to be kicking that off pretty soon. But I have online courses as well that people can just do themselves. So it has all the videos and workbooks and everything that they can download and do in their own privacy. And then they include a one-on-one coaching session with me as well. So they can find that. For the Divorce Coaching Academy, you can find us on the divorcecoachingacademy.com. Our next session that we have open spaces in is going to be in September. So that's going to be our next cohort of students, because the other one was full. And we will be accredited by the Academy of Coaching, hopefully by then as well. And we've got 15 students who've been really, really happy with that. So they give their recommendations on our website. The cost, if you book now, is $1,500. We're giving a special discount of half price at the moment, because we're still waiting for the Coaching Academy to accredit the course. As soon as we finish marking all the last course items from the students, we can send it all in. But by the time September comes, we'll have that accreditation, so it'll be 3,000 then. And it's a 12-week course, 12 to 14 weeks, and they get one-on-one mentoring from us, and they get into triads where they get to pretend to be a coach, act as a client, or observe, and learn so much. And we do everything from all the coaching exercises you would learn if you were to become a coach anyway. We go through all that. We go through NLP, go through some really deep coaching exercises. We also teach them how to set up their business. So we give them a business in a box, how to be successful and set up their own business. And then we take them through all the 4 stages: the pre-divorce, planning, during, and post. And we focus on what we call the 7 C's, which includes conflict, communication, children, cash. I can't think of the other ones at the moment, but go through those 7 C's through each of those 4 phases. So when they come out, they're an expert across all of those, or they can choose to focus on just one area that they like. So some people like to do the pre-divorce and relationship coaching, and other people like to do post-divorce and recovering after the trauma. And other people do the during, but you can do all 4 if you want to, like I do. So yeah, we've had people get so much experience because we give them all these different scenarios that they have to work through and practice, and we give them all the mentoring and advice throughout. So when they come out, they've got about 84 hours of coaching accreditation already to their name, which they can use then to get even executive divorce. And if they keep going, they can actually get a master's in divorce coaching. So they come out with a diploma with us and can get accredited as a master divorce coach as well.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, and we just come back from London from meeting most of our students over there. Then I've got my students here in Ireland as well, and everyone stays in contact with each other. And every month we do, for 12 months, we provide supervised supervision. So people come to us and have either one-on-ones or come as a group and say, I've got a problem with this client. I'm not sure how to handle this situation, and we'll give them some advice and mentoring. So we're always there for them if they come up with a difficult situation. And then every month we also put on additional specific accreditation for them. So we just did one about coercive control and abuse. We're doing one around menopause and the impact, and we're doing one around pre-mediation, as I said before. So every month there's kind of new knowledge that they get to be part of. So yeah, we're very happy with it. So myself, my background is I also left an abusive relationship. So I've got that and my executive coaching background. Sue Palmer-Kahn, who we work with, she is she's an ex-dean of a university. Her background is in psychology, and she used to work as a forensic psychologist for the police in the UK. So she's got a huge amount of knowledge in that and lots of expertise in different parts of divorce coaching. And she focuses on what's called grey divorce. So people who are 50 or over who are separated or divorced, which is the biggest growing area actually. And that's usually when children are a bit more grown up, and it's more about the pensions, and maybe people haven't been in work for a long time. So the specific areas there. And then Tom Nash, who's Mr. Divorce Coach, is the only UK male divorce coach. So he focuses on male divorce, what it's like for men. And also he's actually remarried and has a blended family. So it's really funny in his situation because his ex-wife now goes out with his current partner's ex-husband. And so they have 4 children, they as a blended family. So he specializes in co-parenting and blended families, and brings a different aspect to that. So within all of those expertises, we've brought it all together into one course. So we're very proud. We're apparently the gold standard in divorce coaching globally. So we actually have people from America, Asia, all over Europe coming to our courses as well, because they are seeing it as being the most comprehensive course in the world at the moment. So we're very proud of that.
Yeah, that is spectacular. And I know one of the students from your course, and I know she was really happy with it, and she felt like she was learning so much, and she really enjoyed those the triads, the sessions where you're practicing, someone is observing. She says she's learned a lot. So even if she already had, we studied together, she already had a diploma and she was already a coach, but she still got so much out of it. And it's really amazing to see something like that. So I guess I can say on behalf of many people listening, thank you so much for the work that you
Happy
do.
to help. Yeah.
Thank you for having set all of this up. And thank you as well for the time that you've given us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Liliana, for allowing me to share the story and be able to help more people.